What if I told you the British royal family owes its throne to a French invasion, a German import, and a PR stunt so crazy it would put modern influencers to shame? That the world's most famous monarchy wasn't built on divine right, but on war, scandal, and sheer political cunning? This isn't the fairy tale you've been told. It's a story so riddled with betrayal, deception, and foreign interference, it might as well be a medieval soap opera. The British royal family, often seen as the embodiment of tradition and national pride, was forged in chaos. Beneath the glittering crowns and polished reputations lies a truth that will shatter the illusion of noble lineage and eternal stability. From questionable claims to the throne to some deeply buried skeletons, their path to power was anything but regal. This is no ordinary history lesson. This is the shocking truth of how the British royal family was created, a truth that rewrites centuries of carefully crafted myth. By the end of this journey, you'll understand how a family of invaders, opportunists, and strategists managed to secure the most enduring monarchy in the world. Hold tight, because once the curtain is pulled back, the story you're about to hear is wilder than fiction. Long before the British royal family claimed their spot on glossy postage stamps, Britain was a patchwork of tribal kings, warlords, and loosely organized communities. The earliest days of kingship in Britain were not about crowns or castles, but about who could wield the biggest axe and command the fiercest warriors. Leadership was earned on the battlefield, not inherited in a cradle. But this primitive kingship planted the seeds for what would eventually become a monarchy steeped in ritual and power. The Anglo-Saxons arrived in Britain around the 5th century, and with them came a new concept of rulership. These were not kings of divine right, but leaders chosen or fought for by warrior clans. Each region had its own ruler, leading to a fragmented land of competing kingdoms like Mercia, Wessex, and Northumbria. These rivalries weren't just territorial, they were a bloody sport. To survive, a ruler needed cunning, alliances, and a sharp sword. This chaotic structure eventually gave rise to a more centralized form of kingship under leaders like Alfred the Great of Wessex, often considered the first king of the English. Alfred the Great wasn't just a warrior king, he was a PR genius. He branded himself as a protector of Christianity against Viking invaders, ensuring his name would be celebrated in history, even if his reign often teetered on the brink of collapse. If the Anglo-Saxons laid the groundwork, the Normans were the demolition team. In 1066, William the Conqueror, a man whose title tells you everything about his career ambitions, invaded England and declared himself king. His claim was based on a dubious promise from Edward the Confessor. William didn't just win a crown, he bulldozed Anglo-Saxon traditions, replacing them with a feudal system that centralized power in the hands of the king. William's victory wasn't just about swords and shields, it was about psychological warfare. To intimidate the population, he ordered the Domesday Book, a detailed inventory of land and resources, sending a clear message: I own everything now, including you. By the 12th century, the monarchy had become a hereditary institution, but not without drama. The Plantagenets, who ruled from the late 12th century, were known for their fiery tempers and relentless ambition. Figures like Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine turned the royal court into a battleground of political maneuvering and scandal. Meanwhile, kings like Richard the Lionheart spent more time on crusades than in England, leaving governance to bureaucrats and opportunistic rivals. Richard the Lionheart is celebrated as a heroic king, but he spent only about 6 months of his 10-year reign in England. The rest of the time, fighting wars abroad and draining the royal treasury to fund them. As the centuries rolled on, the British monarchy became less about conquering new lands and more about surviving the internal power struggles, bloody family feuds, and scandalous royal marriages that would make any reality TV show look tame. The dynastic dramas that played out on the throne weren't just political. They were deeply personal, involving rival factions, broken oaths, and the kind of backstabbing that could only come from within the royal family itself. In the 15th century, the monarchy's internal squabbles escalated into the infamous Wars of the Roses, a series of bloody conflicts between two rival branches of the Plantagenet family: the House of Lancaster, symbolized by a red rose, and the House of York, symbolized by a white rose. The battle for the throne became so brutal that the term Wars of the Roses is believed to have been coined much later. The wars culminated in the brutal deaths of several kings, including Henry VI, whose reign saw the throne slip slip from his hands multiple times, and Richard III, whose notorious death in the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485 marked the end of the Yorkist line and the rise of the Tudors. The victor, Henry Tudor, would go on to become Henry V and found the Tudor dynasty, bringing an uneasy peace to the monarchy. Richard III, who was crowned king after the mysterious deaths of his nephews, whom he supposedly had murdered to secure his own claim, was only 32 years old when he died in battle. His death sparked a wave of rumors. Some believed he was killed by a curse. Others speculated that his skeletal remains discovered centuries later under a parking lot were proof of his bloody reign. The Tudors were no strangers to scandal. At the helm of the dynasty was Henry VIII, whose obsession with securing a male heir turned the royal court into a hotbed of intrigue, betrayal, and scandal. His 6 marriages alone could fill an entire series of Netflix dramas. The most infamous of his wives were Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard, both of whom ended up losing their heads for failing to provide the longed-for son. Henry VIII didn't just execute 2 of his wives. He also had his second wife, Anne Boleyn, accused of adultery, incest, and treason, charges that were almost certainly fabricated to justify his desire to marry Jane Seymour. Henry VIII's break from the Catholic Church to form the Church of England was another dramatic chapter in the story of the monarchy. Desperate for a divorce from Catherine of Aragon, he declared himself the supreme head of the Church, setting the stage for the English Reformation. This decision would permanently alter the course of history, not just for Britain, but for the entire Christian world. Henry VIII's desperate need for a male heir wasn't just personal, it was political. His lack of a son had the potential to destabilize the monarchy, sparking fears of civil war and succession crises, which he desperately sought to avoid. In the 17th century, the Stuart family took the throne. The early Stuarts ruled with a firm belief in the divine right of kings, which essentially meant they saw themselves as answerable only to God, not to Parliament or the people. This belief was the beginning of a disastrous clash between the monarchy and Parliament, culminating in the English Civil War. King Charles I's refusal to compromise with Parliament led to his eventual execution in 1649, making him the first reigning British monarch to be publicly executed. His death was a shockwave that reverberated across Europe, as the idea of regicide was considered unthinkable at the time. The monarchy was abolished after his death, and England briefly became a republic under Oliver Cromwell. However, the monarchy was restored in 1660 with Charles II, but with a drastically changed relationship to Parliament, setting the stage for the constitutional monarchy that would emerge in the 18th century. Charles II, though called the Merry Monarch, was far from a saint. He had numerous mistresses and was suspected of fathering many illegitimate children. His reign was marked by political instability, but also by the first stirrings of modern political movements, such as the rise of political parties. The dynastic dramas and scandals of these centuries shaped the monarchy into something far more complex than a mere figurehead. From bloody battles and royal beheadings to religious upheaval and royal divorces, the monarchy of this era was one of raw power, ambition, and intrigue. These royal families weren't just ruling, they were surviving, adapting, and sometimes reinventing themselves in the face of unrelenting political and personal turmoil. The British royal family didn't just inherit their title, they fought, schemed, and bled for it. By the early 18th century, the British monarchy was teetering on the brink of major change. With a world in flux and a nation still recovering from the religious and political upheavals of the previous century, a new dynasty was about to rise, one that was less about royal bloodlines and more about political necessity. Enter the House of Hanover. This wasn't just another royal family with a claim to the throne. Oh no, the Hanovers were foreigners, and their ascension to the British throne would set off a series of events that would reshape the monarchy and Britain itself. The year 1688 saw the momentous Glorious Revolution, where King James II, a Catholic monarch, was overthrown in favor of his Protestant daughter, Mary II, and her husband, William of Orange. This was a direct response to the growing fear of a Catholic monarchy in England, and it set the stage for a political transformation. The English monarchy would never again be the absolute, unchecked power it once was. The Glorious Revolution was not as bloodless as the history books often portray it. The overthrow of James II was the culmination of years of political tension, and although it involved little direct fighting. It was an epic power struggle involving the future of Protestantism in Europe, not just England. The new rulers, William and Mary, introduced the Bill of Rights in 1689, which limited royal powers and laid the groundwork for a constitutional monarchy. By 1701, the Act of Settlement ensured that only Protestants could inherit the British throne, excluding any Catholic claimants. This laid the foundation for the Hanoverian succession and, unbeknownst to many at the time, opened the door to an entirely foreign dynasty. The real shocker came when, in 1714, the British throne passed to the House of Hanover. This was not a case of some distant relative being crowned. It was the direct result of political maneuvering. The most eligible Protestant heir was a German prince named George I, who, despite being the great-grandson of James VI, spoke little to no English and had spent most of his life in Germany. And so, Britain's new king arrived from Hanover, a small duchy in northern Germany, ushering in a new era of royal foreignness. George I's ability to speak German and not a lick of English was only the beginning of the monarchy's PR problems. To make matters worse, George wasn't particularly loved by his new subjects. Many saw him as an outsider, a foreign ruler who wasn't connected to the British people. Ironically, he was welcomed for his ability to solidify Protestant rule in Britain, but the people weren't exactly eager to see a German king in the royal court. Despite his language barrier, George I's reign marked the beginning of a significant shift in British governance. Though he was technically the head of state, the real power increasingly lay in the hands of Parliament, specifically the Prime Minister. The Hanoverians, it turned out, would have to share power with the growing influence of elected officials. George I wasn't the only royal to have trouble adapting to British life. His son, George II, followed in his father's footsteps, spending more time in Hanover than England. The royal family's connection to Germany, with its feudal traditions and distant relationship to Britain, created tensions that would continue for centuries. While the Hanoverians were able to stabilize the throne, their rule was far from scandal-free. George II's reign saw tensions between the royal family and the growing power of Parliament, culminating in the political maneuvering of his son, George III. And then came the scandals. George III, the famously mad king, whose descent into mental illness marked one of the monarchy's darkest periods. George III, who reigned from 1760 to 1820, became infamous for his struggles with what we now understand as mental illness. His erratic behavior was blamed on a number of causes, including genetic predispositions and possibly lead poisoning, a result of the royal family's lead-based cosmetics, among other things. At one point, his madness was so severe that he was unable to rule effectively, leading to a regency period where his son, George IV, took over in his stead. The diagnosis of George III's mental illness remains controversial. Some historians believe his episodes were due to a hereditary condition like porphyria, while others argue it was simply a reflection of the intense pressures of kingship and royal expectations. The truth is, we'll never really know for sure. Beyond George III's personal tribulations, the Hanoverians also had to contend with the growing independence of the American colonies, culminating in the American Revolution. The loss of the American colonies was a monumental blow to Britain's global influence and to the royal family's image as the head of an empire. This was the first major crack in the veneer of the British monarchy's global dominance. After the loss of the American colonies, some critics in Britain demanded that the monarchy be abolished altogether. The very foundations of royal power were shaken, but the monarchy survived by adapting to the changing world, setting the stage for the next great transformation. By the time Queen Victoria came to the throne in 1837, the monarchy had undergone several transformations. The Hanoverian legacy was finally starting to settle into something more recognizably British. Victoria's reign saw the monarchy reinvent itself as a symbol of moral stability, family values, and national pride. Queen Victoria's image as a devoted wife and mother helped counteract the earlier controversies surrounding the royal family. Her marriage to Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, yes, another German royal, became a model of Victorian respectability and domestic bliss, helping to forge the modern image of the royal family as a symbol of national unity. Despite her image as the paragon of virtue, Queen Victoria had a hidden passion for art and a secret stash of private journals that were filled with racy language and reflections on her sexual relationship with Prince Albert. Her private life, far from being the staid example the public saw, was much more complex. As the Hanoverian dynasty crumbled into the 19th century, the monarchy found new ways to adapt to the changing world. Though its foreign roots remained, the royal family slowly reinvented itself, crafting an image of Britishness that would define it for generations to come. The monarchy had survived civil wars, mental breakdowns, and political crises, only to emerge in the hands of a queen who would redefine what it meant to be royal in an increasingly modern world. The British monarchy, as we know it, was born from a mixture of foreign blood, scandal, and strategic reinvention. By the 20th century, the British monarchy faced its greatest challenges yet, both from within and from outside the kingdom. The days of absolute power were long gone, but the monarchy's relevance was still in question as the world rapidly transformed. Wars, changing social norms, and the collapse of empires would put the monarchy to the ultimate test. In 1914, World War I erupted, and with it came a crisis of identity for the British royal family. For centuries, the monarchy had enjoyed a sense of unshakable continuity, but the Great War was about to change everything. Suddenly, the royal family wasn't just dealing with political crises. It was facing a very real threat to its very existence. One of the most shocking moments came in 1917 when King George I, under immense pressure to distance himself from his German relatives, changed the name of the royal family from the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, a German name, to the House of Windsor. This was more than a rebranding. It was an acknowledgement that the family's German roots, though once a symbol of strength and alliance, had become a liability in a world at war with Germany. The royal family's connection to Germany wasn't just through their name. George IV's cousins included the German Kaiser Wilhelm II, who led Germany into the war, and Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, who would later be executed by Bolsheviks. This tight-knit European royal network, once a symbol of peace and diplomacy, was now seen as a scandalous link to the enemy. The change to Windsor marked a clear attempt to align the monarchy with British nationalism and patriotism. But it wasn't just a matter of changing names. The royal family had to reinvent itself entirely, adopting new symbols, narratives, and behaviors to reflect their role as national figures rather than foreign rulers. This was a strategic pivot that would shape their role in the 20th century and beyond. The monarchy's attempt at reinvention wasn't without scandal. In 1936, King Edward VIII shocked the world by abdicating the throne to marry Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee. Edward's decision to give up the crown for love was seen as a complete betrayal of royal duty, and it sparked a constitutional crisis that threatened the very fabric of the monarchy. Edward VIII wasn't just a romantic fool. His relationship with Wallis Simpson was embroiled in international intrigue, with some speculating that Edward was sympathetic to Nazi Germany's rise. The idea that the British king might have leaned toward a fascist regime was not only scandalous, it was terrifying. When Edward VIII abdicated, it was his younger brother, George VI, who took the throne. George VI, previously known as the Duke of York, became an unlikely monarch with little preparation for the role. His reign would be defined by courage and perseverance, as he helped lead Britain through the dark days of World War II, even as his country grappled with the trauma of the abdication scandal. George VI's speech impediment, which was famously depicted in the film The King's Speech, was more than a mere personal issue. It symbolized the monarchy's struggle to adapt to a new age of media, politics, and public scrutiny. Yet, despite his stutter, George VI became a beloved figure for his resilience and dedication to his country. After the war, the British monarchy was forever changed. The post-war period saw a dramatic shift in the global order, with the decline of the British Empire and the rise of the United States and the Soviet Union as superpowers. The monarchy had to evolve or risk becoming irrelevant. Queen Elizabeth II, who ascended the throne in 1952, would usher in the most dramatic shift of all. Under her reign, the British Empire officially disbanded, and the monarchy had to redefine its role in a new, multicultural, and much smaller Britain. No longer could the royal family simply bask in imperial glory. Instead, they had to find new ways to connect with their people and with the Commonwealth. While the monarchy was busy reinventing itself as a symbol of continuity, Elizabeth II's reign saw the monarchy face modern-day scandals, some of which seemed more like reality TV plots than royal affairs. The 1990s, in particular, brought a series of personal and public crises, culminating in the tragic death of Princess Diana. The 1990s were a tumultuous time for the British royal family. Princess Diana, the first wife of Prince Charles, became the ultimate tabloid sensation. Her fairy tale marriage turned into a very public soap opera with a messy divorce. allegations of infidelity, and her own struggles with mental health and the press. Diana's marriage to Prince Charles was filled with affairs on both sides. While Charles had his well-documented relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, Diana's own extramarital affairs were less publicized but equally scandalous. Their breakup, though officially a royal divorce, was viewed as a heartbreaking personal and public tragedy. Despite her messy personal life, Diana became a beloved figure in the eyes of the public. She was known as the People's Princess, a title that captured her ability to connect with ordinary people, as well as her charity work. Her tragic death in a car crash in 1997 sent shockwaves through the world, and the royal family's handling of her death and the public's anger at their perceived indifference led to a significant reevaluation of the monarchy's relationship with the British people. Diana's death was shrouded in conspiracy theories, many of which claimed that her death was not an accident but a deliberate plot. While no conclusive evidence has emerged to support these theories, the royal family's handling of the situation was widely criticized for its cold and distant approach, further fueling the public's disillusionment. Despite the scandals, the monarchy has managed to survive into the 21st century. Today, Queen Elizabeth II's descendants, Charles, William, and Harry, continue to navigate the delicate balance between tradition and modernity. Public interest in the royal family remains high, and they continue to serve as symbols of national unity, even as their role is more symbolic than ever before. As we look to the future, one thing is clear: the British royal family's history is anything but ordinary. It is a history built on scandal, survival, and most of all, adaptation. The monarchy has always been a product of its time, and its ability to adapt to modern pressures is a key factor in its continued survival. But one can't help but wonder, how much longer will the monarchy continue to evolve, and will it survive the changing world around it? The British royal family's journey from medieval warlords to modern-day celebrities has been anything but linear. From battles to beheadings, scandals to rebrands, the monarchy has adapted to survive every major crisis thrown its way. As the 21st century unfolds, the British monarchy faces new challenges, not from rivals or foreign invaders, but from relentless media scrutiny. Every royal move is dissected, and public opinion now plays a central role in the monarchy's survival. In the 1980s and 90s, the rise of tabloid journalism turned royal lives into fodder for sensational stories. The tragic tale of Princess Diana's marriage, divorce, and eventual death at the hands of the paparazzi highlighted the dangers of this media culture. Diana's death in 1997 forced the royal family to confront their image, particularly their perceived coldness in the face of public grief. Diana's tragic death led to the public questioning the monarchy's relevance, marking a turning point where the royals had to adapt to survive. Queen Elizabeth II's reign saw the monarchy transition from a symbol of empire to a more modern institution. Yet her reign also faced crises, from a royal fire at Windsor Castle to growing public discontent over family scandals. Elizabeth became more open about royal struggles, but she was forced to balance tradition with a changing world. In 1992, the Queen described the year as an annus horribilis, reflecting the royal family's deepening struggles. The most shocking moment came in 2020 when Prince Harry and Meghan Markle stepped back from royal duties. The couple's decision was seen as a direct challenge to the monarchy's centuries-old expectations. Their tell-all interview with Oprah Winfrey revealed accusations of racism and mental health struggles, sparking public debate about the monarchy's future. Harry and Meghan's departure challenged the monarchy's very role in the modern world, as the family faced calls for change. With public opinion increasingly skeptical, especially among younger generations, the monarchy's future hangs in the balance. Can an ancient institution survive in an age of transparency, social media, and global scrutiny? The monarchy still represents tradition and stability, but whether it can adapt to the modern era remains uncertain. A 2019 survey showed that support for the monarchy was waning, particularly among younger Britons, raising the question, is it time for a republic? The British royal family has navigated centuries of transformation, from medieval power to modern-day celebrity. Despite surviving wars, scandals, and the rise of social media, their ability to stay relevant is increasingly questioned. As public opinion shifts, especially among younger generations, the monarchy faces a pivotal moment. Will it adapt to the demands of the 21st century or fade into irrelevance? The royal family's future depends on balancing tradition with change, navigating new challenges while holding on to its symbolic power. Though support for the monarchy is waning, its influence, especially within the Commonwealth, remains strong. But whether it can continue to evolve and survive remains uncertain. The monarchy's next chapter will be defined by how well it adapts to the modern world, or if the weight of its past proves too much to carry.